Hello everyone, I'm Bestie and joined by Honorable Julian Hills, Member of Australian Federal Parliament. Mr. Hill is an amazing role model. He got a very clear voice for the people of Southeast community in Victoria in the Australian Federal Parliament. What I like the most about Mr. Hill is his authenticity, his clear voice and loud message to the rest of Australia. This coming election, he will be representing for the third time the Bruce community. And now here is Mr. Hills. Hello and welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be with you, Mehdi, and hello to everyone.
You are more friendly in person than on the TV, on TikTok. That was an ice-breaking question, actually.
Right, an ice-breaking question. Well, thank you for saying that. Most Australian politicians are actually normal people. It's one of the great things about our political culture that people from all different backgrounds and parts of Australia can aspire to be in Parliament and get elected to Parliament. The Australian culture generally doesn't like fake people or authenticity, so basically just be yourself.
Absolutely. I really like when you're representing the community and explaining with a very analytical way, and it's in a very simple term. I always enjoy watching your videos. So I'm going to ask a few more easy questions and then we're going to go to the real topics. Sure. What is your favorite state and which city is your favorite in Australia?
Oh, my favorite state? Goodness me. Well, that's a question that gets you into trouble if you're... Look, I have to say probably Western Australia is my favorite state. I love WA.
Oh, Western Australia.
I've got a very dear friend, Senator Louise Pratt.
Okay.
Louise and I have been friends since we were 19 or 20 through university things, and probably most years, for many years, I've visited Western Australia and spent time in Perth, but in other parts of the state. Yeah. Spent a bit of time up the northwest. It's just a magical place. It's about 1/3 of the whole of the Australian continent, but very few people. So it's a terrific place. But of course, I love all the states.
I was surprised. I thought that you were going to say Victoria, but yeah.
I love Victoria. I've always lived in Melbourne. I've always lived in Victoria. Okay. This is my home.
Yeah, absolutely.
If there's a place that I would love to spend more time in and explore, that I haven't spent as much time in as I'd like, I'd probably say Western Australia.
Amazing. I haven't been there yet, so hopefully one day. Not yet. No. Okay. Do you panic sometime before sharing your speech in Parliament House? Do you panic?
I don't panic. No, I don't panic, but certainly Parliament at first is a big scary place.
It is.
The first things I felt on the first day or two that I was sitting in there and Parliament was sitting when I was first elected is, number one, it's really big. Yeah. It's actually a really big chamber when you sit down there.
It is.
And you feel like a little goldfish in the bowl with everyone watching, and it's very loud.
Yeah.
You gradually, I suppose, get used to arguing your case and representing your community in that forum. It is the nation's most important debating chamber.
Okay, interesting.
It should be a robust place for debate. But so, no, I don't panic, but yeah, you still get nervous and sometimes you're more prepared and sometimes you're not as prepared as you'd like to be.
Absolutely. I'm sure there is so many people make it more comfortable for you and for other member of Parliament. I thought maybe I should ask you who is your bestie? I know a few times you indicated a few member of Parliament.
Yeah.
Who is your bestie, best friend in Parliament House?
My best friend in Parliament? Well, there's an old saying, if you want a friend in politics, get a dog.
Okay.
That's an old famous saying, which was perhaps making the point that political life is not easy, not asking for sympathy. We choose to do it. It's a privileged role to represent the community. But Louise, as I said, my friend from WA, she's my oldest friend. Yeah. We share a house together.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so we bought a house together, so we have a flat that we share as friends. And but really, you form really close relationships with so many people, including people sometimes who you might have thought at first you weren't going to get along with because you meet each other or you work together on a particular issue. So, I like most. I like my Labor colleagues, and I like many people who have different political views to me. Not all of them. Some of them are awful.
Okay. Yeah. I thought you were going to say Tanya, because I don't know, for some reason, I was watching the other night your first speech in Parliament House. You mentioned Tanya, your best friend, your colleague, long time. Yeah.
I've known Tanya from my early 20s. She is a very good friend. She's a terrific human
She's
being.
amazing. Yeah. She's such a great role model. I follow her.
Yeah.
All the time. Amazing. Let's go back a little bit in history. So this is your third time. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're going to be representing the Bruce community to the Australian Federal Parliament. Yeah.
Yeah. So the seat of Bruce is in southeast Melbourne.
Yeah.
It's centred on Dandenong.
Yeah.
So if people aren't sure where it is, because it's just a funny name,
Yeah.
it's centred on Dandenong. There's a tradition in federal politics of naming seats after former prime ministers. So Stanley Melbourne Bruce was Prime Minister of Australia from 1923 to 1929. So that's why the seat's called Bruce.
I didn't know. He was the Prime Minister of
He was the
Australia.
Prime Minister. So traditionally, after a Prime Minister dies, they will name a seat. So in Victoria, Bob Hawke died, and there's the new seat of Hawke this election being created in the west of Melbourne. So Stanley Bruce was the Prime Minister. So that's why it's called Bruce. It's changed a lot. So it's centred in Dandenong, the most multicultural council in the whole of Australia. I'm privileged to have represented the Bruce for the last 2 terms. I hope to have a 3rd term and be successful at the election, but that's up to the people.
Yeah, people, you know what you're doing. Definitely, I should go and read. Please excuse my ignorance about the history of Bruce, but definitely what a legend. I should be reading about that. Thanks for educating me about that. Yeah. So before 2016, you working in different areas, but like in 2016 election, you went door to door to speak to people. Probably you have been speaking to thousands of people at that time. So what was the common issue they were like bringing to you at that time, and like how did you articulate it or escalate it to the higher level?
Yeah, so before I was elected, I spent over a year door knocking.
Yeah.
Just going and visiting people at their houses. You can't visit everyone in a federal electorate, they're just too big. In Bruce now there's about 190,000 people, including non-citizens as well as citizens' children and so on. But I've spent time every weekend and then full-time for a few months when I finished work, visiting people in every different suburb in the electorate. I had wonderful conversations. There's a really diverse community, but probably the most common thing when you say to people what's most important to you, you get a whole range of responses. Everything from could you fix the street tree at the front of my property, through to big global issues and national security. But the most common thing which people said was education. And I thought a lot about that because it wasn't just young people wanting to go to university or parents worried about their kids. It was also grandparents worried about their grandkids, people who'd lost their job and wanted to reskill and retrain in the middle of life. But I think above all else, it's because we have such a high percentage of people who've migrated to Australia, who were born somewhere else, who come to this country, whether as business migrants, skilled migrants, refugees fleeing war and persecution, people who just fell in love with an Australian and got married. However they came here, international students, they have this focus on a better life for their children through education. And that was the most common thing.
Okay, education, amazing. I came as a refugee in Australia as well. I studied in Dandenong High. I had the privilege of studying here and went to university. I'm so grateful, honestly. Sometimes I'm thinking like if this opportunity was not available for me, I would not be making, and I would not be sitting here and talking to Mr. Hills today. I should be really grateful of this area. I love Dandenong,
Yeah, I love Dandenong too, and one of my great loves in life is travelling. I've, as I said before, only ever lived in Melbourne, Victoria. It's a regret that I haven't been able to live overseas because my daughter was born when I was very young, when I was 22, so I've always been in Melbourne. But I say to anyone, if you need just a taste of other cultures, if you're missing travelling, come to Dandenong Market. Do your shopping at Dandenong Market. You'll see people from all over the world. You can talk to people of different cultures. People speak different languages. It's a terrific place and very rare in the world. If you think across the entire world, there'd hardly be anywhere like the city of Greater Dandenong and Casey now, city of Casey as well, where you get people from over 150 countries all living peacefully side by side.
Yeah, that's.
There's just not many places like that. Maybe some places in Canada you could think of, but really Australia is quite unique, and our part of the world is just so special.
Yeah, I remember like it is so multicultural in here. I remember like one of my friend came from Europe. We were studying together, and then like one day I invited him to Dandenong, and then we were walking around Dandenong. He was like, "Maybe tell me what kind of people live here," and I was explaining like Indian, Afghan, from like Albanian, Serbian, like all sort of people living in here, Greek, and he was so shocked. He was like, "You guys are like so multicultural in here," and he already liked it. He was like, I was like, one thing I really like about Dandenong, you could taste the food of anywhere, and you can say hello to anyone, and they turn out to be from some other part of the world.
Yeah, and you can learn about their cultural traditions. We've got Nowruz in the next couple of weeks. I was just visited this morning 3 different mosques as part of the Mosque Open Day. So I was at the Listerfield Mosque and the Afghan Mosque in Hallam and in Doveton, and the very multicultural mosque in Hallam. People welcome you in to share their cultural traditions, which makes it a more interesting community. Yeah,
Nowruz is like the Persian New Year for those of you who don't know. But Mr. Hill knows about those sort of stuff because he's living and representing people from this area. So let's talk a little bit about like one specific question which came from the community to me is like a lot of Hazara and Afghan people living in Dandenong in Australia especially, and people are splitted with their family for like more than 10 years, husband and wife, like children and parents and siblings, brother and sister, and they are waiting desperately for their application to be processed. But under this government, they have been waiting for so long that now they are like hopeless. And I'm one of the example, I myself subjected to those unhuman policies. So do you think this issue will ever be resolved? I know like you have been raising this issue in Parliament House many times. Do you think this issue going to be resolved under this government or in the future?
Well, in answer to the last question directly, no, I don't. I think we need to change the government.
Yeah.
The Australian visa system and the migration system is broken. The Department of Home Affairs is now like a black hole where people send paperwork, they send applications, and nothing comes back for months or years. People can no longer talk to another human being who knows what's going on. Their emails don't get responded to.
That's true.
And as you said at the start, these are people's families. These are not just business connections. They're their actual families, husbands, wives, children, who in many cases people have not seen for years. They've missed those years of their kids growing up.
Yeah.
It's going to be no easy job to fix. If Labor do win the election in the next couple of months, it's going to take us a long time to repair this mess that the government's got us into. But I think it comes down to a few things. The Liberal government cut thousands of staff from the Department of Home Affairs. So I don't blame the staff working in Home Affairs. They're good people doing the best they can. But there are not enough of them, and that's going to take time to fix, to get the budget money and recruit and train people and decide what the priorities are. The second problem we have is leadership. Peter Dutton, Scott Morrison before him, and now the other ministers set a culture where they just don't care. You know, I write to the minister, you raise these cases, heartbreaking cases.
It is.
And a response comes months later, and eventually something might happen. So leadership matters. If Christina Keneally is elected as the Immigration Home Affairs Minister, I think she'll take a very different approach, but it will take time. The third thing I'd say is there has been active discrimination by the Liberals against people from Afghanistan.
That was my another question, but you already answered it. Okay, elaborate more on that, please.
So, when I say active discrimination, if you fall in love with someone, or your husband or wife is from Afghanistan, and this mainly affects Afghan people, but not only. I've found other people in the community who are from a different country, whose husband or wife is from Afghanistan, and they're affected as well. If it takes, on average, about 43 to 48 months now to get your family visa.
I wish 48 months, but like people waiting for 10 years.
And there are some people that come to my office who've been waiting for 8-10 years for that family visa. If you fall in love with someone from America or from Western Europe, in Germany, it might take 5 to 7 months to get that visa. That's discrimination.
It is.
The government could choose to put more resources into processing these cases. Now, I do know, of course, let's be real and be fair, it will always, I think, take somewhat longer to process these visas because identity paperwork is more complex. We know that there's sometimes more fraud, or often, and we've found these cases, people don't realise their documents are not genuine.
Yeah.
Because they've got them from the police station, the policeman just, took the money and made up some things. So I get all that.
True.
I do understand the difficulties, to be fair to any government.
Yeah.
It will take a bit longer. And there's translations and there's security checks, all of that. Of course we have to do health checks and security checks, but it shouldn't take on average 4 years, and it shouldn't take that much longer than elsewhere. The second problem, of course, is that the government, we believe, has been illegally capping the number of family visas issued each year.
Yeah.
We've raised that concern. And they've actively discriminated against people who arrived by boat 10, 11 years ago.
Yeah.
Now, Labor is very clear. We do not want the people smuggling trade to restart. We're not going to let that happen. Mm-hmm. But we also need to deal with the people who are here.
Yeah.
They're now part of the Australian community.
Mm-hmm.
It does our society, for every Australian, it does our society no good to have this underclass of people who've been waiting for 5, 10 years for their citizenship, who are working, paying taxes, part of the community, involved in the community life.
Integrated to Australian values.
Into Australian values, all of that, you know, many of them part of community organisations, joining Rotary clubs, school captains, their kids, all of that stuff. And yet they've been waiting for 8 to 10 years for this miserable government to give them their citizenship.
Yeah.
Why should they be treated like that?
Yeah.
And of course then, until they've got their citizenship, they get no priority for their family reunion. It is just heartbreaking talking to people knowing there's nothing that I can do for them because the government has a policy of discrimination. That's not fair.
I absolutely agree, because I seen number of friend of mine from our community. They have been like tortured by these policies, mentally, emotionally. They have been waiting for so long. Now they lost hope, and now they are like thinking and saying like, okay, this is not what I was expecting like 10 years ago. And in the past 10 years, I have been working, paying taxes, and still like I am living on limbo.
Yeah.
It's kind of like life in limbo, and you don't have like a status of identity to call yourself Australian.
That's right.
You already integrated to Australian values, paying taxes and helping the community and like distributing or like contributing to community as much as you can, but it's still like you're getting treated like the third citizen of like the country, which is so unfortunate to these people.
And then of course there's the temporary protection visas, TPVs, and the Chevs. Around 90% thereabouts of people on the temporary protection visas or Chevs are in employment. That's the data we get from the Immigration Department. I think the tiling and the painting and construction industry now would collapse if it wasn't for the brilliant Hazara craftsmen.
I agree.
I mean, they're fantastic.
They got all the tiling under.
They've got all the tiling under control. They're honest. They give fair prices. They do the job when they say they'll do.
They work really hard.
They work really hard. And many of them have not seen their families. Their kids might have been born before they had to escape murder by the Taliban. Many of their families, as you know, are in Quetta in Pakistan or surrounding countries, waiting, hiding, semi-legally, sometimes illegally. And now that the Pakistani government has changed their policy, they're not even allowed to go and visit and see their families. With the borders having been closed for 2 years, this is a horrible situation to miss your kids growing up. And everyone knows these people are genuine refugees. They're never going anywhere else. Many of them have lived their entire adult life in Australia. For all intents and purposes, now they're Australian. After 10 years waiting, can't we just treat them like Australians? I feel really strongly about this, as you know.
I'm so glad. Honestly, like you impressed me with that answer. Like how much insight you have from the community you're representing. Especially you said like Hazara community working in Thailand. Like they totally took that area of construction under their thumb. Like they are like leading that area, and I'm so impressed. Like how much insight you have from the community.
We've got quite a few people, who run businesses who've joined the Labor Party because they've worked out Australian politics. They love the fact that they're in a safe country where if they work hard, they can do well, buy a house, all of those things, and that they get to vote to choose their government, a privilege that they've fought for. And now, unfortunately, with the Taliban's return, has been taken away from people in Afghanistan, and they want to participate in the political process here, which I think is terrific.
Amazing. This is going to lead me, probably it's going to repeat this question itself again, but I'm going to ask this question anyway. The PM recently announced refugees from Ukraine. I feel sorry for the people of Ukraine because I myself, through half of my entire life, I felt it like I am stateless. Because of the war and everything, and I feel sorry for the people of Ukraine. But PM announced, people of Ukraine, especially for refugees, are welcome. We have plenty of space in here. Kind of similar, something like this. The PM said. I remember when Afghanistan fell into the hand of Taliban, and in Australian community, there was a number of Afghan Hazara activists. They were begging Australian government to increase the visa cap for them. But unfortunately, they didn't raise the 3,000 per year, which was so unfortunate. Do you think in politics, there is a different view towards refugees from Afghanistan and from Ukraine?
Yeah, look, it's a complex question. There are more displaced people in the world now, pushing 80 million, than at any time since World War II. It's a huge problem. Australia has historically been, and in some ways continues to be, a generous nation in terms of resettling refugees properly. We've had the political discussion. We will only do that through the proper channels. We're not going to restart a people smuggling trade. But Labor has been very critical about the cuts that the government has made to the humanitarian program.
Yeah.
Overwhelmingly, and many people in the Australian community don't understand this because there's racist, silly stereotypes spread on social media or by the media. Overwhelmingly, refugees and humanitarian migrants are the most entrepreneurial migrants we have. They're more likely to start a business. They're more likely to actually create wealth and buy a home because they come with nothing and they're so grateful to be here and they work hard. In the year 2000, 6 of the 8 billionaires in Australia had all arrived as refugees. We only had 8 billionaires back then, and 6 of them came as refugees. So I always remind people that they can make a great contribution to the community. So Labor's been critical about the overall cuts, and we've said that we would like to see the program restored. We also think that there's a greater place for community sponsorship in the refugee program, looking at some of what Canada's done. In answer to your question, Labor has called for a higher intake of people from Afghanistan. We're never going to be able to resettle the 150,000 people who've applied, and everyone I talk to in the community acknowledges that. But we can do better than the government's measly 2,500 a year over the next 4 years. That's less than 18% of the refugee program for a country where we have people with such strong family connections. So that's the context for me saying I think it's really important that Australia helps and helps quickly to bring family members of Ukrainians here for safety. There are millions of people leaving right now, and Australia can play a small but important part. And particularly, we're a long way from Europe, but we can prioritise those people with family connections to Australia. And they should get priority. But so should the people with the connection from Afghanistan. My point is, to the government, that they are guilty of active discrimination, whether it's on racial or religious grounds, because they have rightly moved very fast to help people from Ukraine. And yet there are the husbands, the wives, the children, in some cases Australian children by descent, who are still waiting after 2, 3, 4 years or more for their visa, and they're waiting in Afghanistan. That's the discrimination that I call out. And I'm sorry it's a long answer, but I want to be really clear why I'm giving that answer. It's in no way because I don't think we should help people from Ukraine. I think we should. But we need to call out the hypocrisy and the double standard of the way the government's behaved.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. thanks for being so clear about that point. And I know, like many times, you have been raising this issue in Parliament as well. I'm hoping someone is listening there. I'm hoping someone in the authority, they are listening. Like, yeah, this is a real issue. What message do you want to give to the Scott Morrison supporter? Like, I don't know, they are blindfolded. They still think like he's the great PM or something like that. What message do you want to give, like, to Scott Morrison's supporter?
Well, this is the most incompetent government in modern Australian history. Even if you have political differences, and people sit on all parts of the political spectrum, as they should in a democracy.
Yeah.
There will always be people with a far more conservative view, people with a more progressive view, and many people in the middle who make their decision based on performance of the government, policies, leadership, and so on. But on any measure, this government is incompetent and they have to go. They're led by a man who is being called out by the people closest to him, the Deputy Prime Minister, Gladys Berejiklian, and the New South Wales Premier. They've all called him out as a liar, and Australians have seen that. But even more than that character, the thing that matters most is the government's failure to deliver for Australians. He failed on the bushfires response, and we're now seeing the same mistakes with the flood response. Too little, too late. They failed on the pandemic response. Australia's an island. We should have the best advantage in the world to manage a pandemic. They closed the borders, but they didn't put in safe national quarantine. They said, oh, we'll leave that to the states. Even after the medical advice said hotel quarantine wouldn't work. So they let the disease into the country, forced the lockdowns. They're Scott Morrison's lockdowns. Some people might blame the Premier's, but they're Scott Morrison's lockdowns. And he didn't order enough vaccines. He didn't order enough rat tests. We've seen the failures on aged care, shocking failures, and they've wasted tens of billions of dollars of money that's going on the national debt for you and your children to repay because of their bad economic management. So I think on every measure, what I'd say to Scott Morrison's supporters, it doesn't matter if you like the bloke or dislike the bloke, it's time they went. They've been there for nearly 10 years. Tony Abbott, Malcolm Turnbull, Scott Morrison, 10 years. Does anyone really think that they'll get better somehow if they have another 3 years?
Based on what you explained, like failure on number of like incident in Australia, and especially like the bushfire event, which was like in 2019, and the quarantine failure, I don't know, you name it, many more, like the vaccine, the ordering the vaccine, quarantine, red text, and those sort of stuff. Do you think our PM, our current PM, has a plan for Australians?
Well, if he does have a plan, then I don't know what it is. And I sit and listen to him every day in Parliament. So far, it seems his only plan now, his hope for the election, is to tell lies about the Labor Party and to scare people. That seems to be what it's down. To divide the country, to pit one group of Australians against another group of Australians, and use fear. Now, fear, unfortunately, for the Conservatives can be a very powerful weapon. And at times, Labor Party and the progressive side of politics has to sell hope. And it's harder sometimes to sell hope and bring people together. But Anthony Albanese is someone, the alternative Prime Minister, the opposition leader, he's someone I've known for 26 years. He's the most authentic politician you'll meet. He's experienced. He's been the Deputy Prime Minister. He's tough. He's smart. I think he'll make a great Prime Minister. And that's one of the big contrasts. Yes, we've got different policies. People can talk about them. But there's a real contrast in character between Scott Morrison, who's a divisive figure. We saw that on the religious discrimination bill. That was something which should bring the country together. Labor supports new laws to protect people from religious discrimination. But we need to do that without creating discrimination against other people. The Prime Minister saw this as a chance to play politics. Anthony is someone who will bring Australians together and seek to unite us and find solutions to problems.
I agree. I agree, because I have been experiencing the inhuman policies in the past 9 years, and I'm counting. I'm really optimistic for this election. Hopefully, this is going to be a different election, and we would be in a different time after after the election. So why the PM is not announcing the election date? Is there any issue?
Well, I'm hopeful too, and I think Labor can win this election, but hope is not a strategy, and we have a lot of hard work to do. Look, Prime Ministers in the Australian system of government, Prime Ministers recommend the election date to the Governor-General. So largely Prime Ministers will choose the election date. The Prime Minister constitutionally, under the Constitution, the last day he could have a normal election is May the 21st. So the election will be on May the 7th, 14th or 21st, but I think it's going to be May the 14th.
Okay.
That would be my bet if I had one.
Yeah, I have been following this election since 2021. I was like hoping by the end of the 2021 they announced the election, because like I was like that's the only hope. Like we can pass it, we can move it to something new. And unfortunately, I'm still waiting every day, like reading the news, like when the election is going to be announced. Yeah, I'm waiting for that news as well, desperately. There is another argument. I think you mentioned, kind of like Scott Morrison is trying to divide Australian. One thing he is, I don't know, like one of Liberal in general try to explain to people that Labor is an Australian national security threat. So like kind of like spooky music, something like that.
Yeah. Be very scared.
Yeah.
He basically said we're all Chinese spies. It was just all ridiculous.
Yeah. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you agree with that?
Well, history and the evidence does not bear that out. Labor has always taken a responsible approach to national security.
Yeah.
To the greatest extent possible, national security should always be bipartisan.
Yeah.
And actually, I listened to Anthony Albanese's speech last week to the Lowy Institute on national security. He made a really important point, that when we have a look at the world and the shift towards autocracy and anti-democracy forces, one of the strengths that a democracy has is actually bipartisanship. So the more that we can achieve bipartisanship, the better and stronger the country will be in dealing with the world.
Yeah.
It's the government, the Liberals, that are so desperate. They have nothing else to run on. They can't run at this election on their record because it's a terrible record.
It is.
They're not running on their policies, positive policies for the country's future, because they don't seem to have any. So they're running on fear and division, trying to make stuff up about Labor. It is irresponsible that they have created this scare campaign again about national security, because it's against Australia's national interest. It weakens our country to create this false division. Labor's policy position, the way we look at the world on the changes in China, on the security outlook in our region, is the same as the government's. We listen to the professional advice, we think about the issues, we support the alliance with the United States, although we do think we can do more to deepen relationships with countries in our region. But no, broadly, that's the same. But it's Scott Morrison that is choosing to create this fake division, to create fear, because he's got nothing else. The final point I'll just say for people who may not be as familiar with Australian history, it was a Labor government that the Parliament turned to in World War II when they elected John Curtin as Prime Minister. It wasn't actually the people even then, it was the Parliament that elected John Curtin, the Labor leader, to be Prime Minister to get us through World War II.
Okay.
It was a Labor government under Bob Hawke and Kim Beazley as Defence Minister that continued that approach of national security, of investing in the Defence Forces. The accusations that Scott Morrison is making are just not borne out by the facts. It's all about trying to create fear and scare people.
Interesting. Let's make it more a little bit to this side of the question. It's going to be a very short question. Feel free to elaborate as much as you can. But best and worst PM in Australia in the past 20 years.
In the past 20 years. Well, in the past 20 years, without a doubt, I think Scott Morrison is the worst Prime Minister. And I'm not just saying that. I didn't agree with Tony Abbott's policies at all. I think he was far too conservative and he saw the world in a very black and white way.
Yeah.
But I don't think he was a fundamentally evil person or bad person. I quite liked Malcolm Turnbull. He wasn't true to himself. He wasn't authentic. I think he would still be Prime Minister if he'd actually been more authentic and led.
Yeah.
I didn't like John Howard's policies, but he was competent at least.
Yeah.
The government ran. Scott Morrison's big sin is, I think he has no policies and no vision. It's all about politics. That's what Gladys Berejiklian, the Liberal Premier of New South Wales, said. Well, she said he's a horrible, horrible person.
Yeah.
But he always puts politics before people.
Before people.
So I think he fails on the character test. He fails on having no policies or vision for the country. His only policy is to stay in power. But he can't even deliver things competently. So I think, without a doubt, he goes down as the worst Prime Minister in the last 20 years. Probably the Prime Minister in the last sort of 20, 30 years who I personally admire the most would be Paul Keating. He's a controversial Prime Minister. And certainly, no doubt everyone makes mistakes. No one is perfect.
True.
But he had a vision for the country, so much of which was proven to be right. And, his formula for leadership, imagination and courage.
The way he made all those investments as early as possible for Australia, and now we are enjoying those product, which is great. Yeah, I came to Australia at the time of Gillard and Kevin Dodd. I think Gillard and Kevin Dodd, they are my favorite. Yeah, they will remain as a favorite.
They're both terrific. I saw Kevin last weekend actually. Yeah. We caught up for a drink, and he's in good form. If I see him in person, definitely I'll shake his hand and say thank you for allowing me to be in Australia and to be the type of person I always wanted. And if not, I would be wasted. Yeah. And if you don't follow me on TikTok already, you've just reminded me I did a little TikTok with Kevin, which I'm going to post very soon. Maybe tonight, when I remember.
Yeah, definitely. That was one of the questions.
Oh.
What is the secret behind your famous TikTok videos? He's very famous on TikTok.
I'm very famous on TikTok. Who knew? To be honest, I wish I knew the secret. I don't know. The work experience student who we had for a week last May, about 10 months ago, put me on TikTok.
Yeah.
So, put me on TikTok, and I thought, what's TikTok? But it seems to have worked, and I get great feedback from people, young and old, about it as a medium, just to talk in 2 or 3 minute videos about a political idea.
Yeah.
So most videos that I make are not specifically for TikTok. They'll be because I feel strongly about something and just make a video. I might put it on YouTube, Facebook, whatever. Or we cut parts of parliamentary speeches and put them on TikTok.
Yeah.
But it seems to have hit a nerve, and people, as they say, no one's going to die wondering what I think about an issue. So perhaps that works in the forum. I speak quite strongly and clearly and firmly when I have a view on something, which I think is really in a democracy what people want.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought you cracked the algorithm. I was like, I should ask you this question today. Teach me how I should be famous on TikTok.
I don't do stunts. That's one thing I don't do. I think that looks pretty sad and tragic. No dancing.
No dancing. Yeah. Only real thing.
Sorry, I have a bit to say.
Does Julian Hills see himself as a future of Australian Prime Minister in the future?
No.
Why not?
I'm not that crazy. No, that's not something which I see myself in the future. Like many members of Parliament, I'd love to have the great privilege of serving in a Labor cabinet. But whether that happens is up to your colleagues and a lot of timing and luck. So, I'm very clear though, I would rather be a backbencher in a Labor government than a shadow minister. I want to serve in a government led by Albo. That's what I'm 100% focused on.
That's my next question. Thank you. That's a very honest question and humble question. Answer. Thank you. I got another question. Do you see if Labour going to win this election? Do you see yourself as one of the ministerial?
Yeah. Well, like I said, look, it's an honest answer, and it's a cultural thing in Australia that people find strange in other countries, where we call it the tall poppy syndrome. So if you're doing too well, or you express an aspiration to be something high or better, or then people kind of cut you down. So you always have to pretend to be humble.
Yeah.
I am a pretty humble person overall.
You are.
I know I'm very lucky.
Very approachable. I am one of the Bruce member, and he's very approachable. Yeah, especially in the events. I just reach out and say hello to him. He's really friendly.
Well, I like people. You can't meet everyone. I wish I could, but I actually really love people. Most people are good. Few not so good, but that's life in humanity. Right now we have a terrifically strong, talented front bench.
Agree.
It's a good problem to have. We have, frankly, so many more people now in the federal parliament who could be and would like to be ministers and who would be very good, but there's not enough spaces. So that's okay. I would just love to be serving in a Labor government. So if we win, I would fully expect that the ministry, the shadow ministry that we have, would translate into government. So who knows what might happen in the future? I don't know.
I love that answer. It's just explaining me like in labor, it's not something like you cut at each other's throat and like get ahead of each other. It's just like supporting each other. You're like, okay, this person is a real talent. He should be in that spot.
And
amazing.
You know, we have a lot of talented people.
Yeah, amazing.
They say people who look at these things say, if Anthony's elected, they will be the most experienced first-term cabinet, certainly since Bob Hawke was elected. They say it was a very talented cabinet, but many of Albo's front bench have served as ministers before.
Yeah,
many not for even very long, but they'll come to government with experience of how to govern, how to work together, how to actually create positive change for Australians and clarity on what they want to do. Okay. That's a really important thing.
Challenging part about being an MP.
The most challenging?
Yeah, in just simple terms.
We do get very tired because I don't sleep very well because I'm always thinking about things.
A lot of work.
No, that's all right. I love work. If you're not prepared to work every day, you really shouldn't have this role and let someone else do it.
By the way, this is public holiday and Julian was working in his office. I came here. Yeah, a lot of work. Yeah.
Look, one of the frustrating things is when you just don't have the power to help someone with something where you see something and you go, that's just not fair. But the law says, or the system says, or in this case, so often it's the hopeless Department of Home Affairs and Migration system. I just wish I had the power to fix the problems that you see. That is a really difficult, frustrating thing. But that's why, I say we have to defeat the Liberals and be able to actually improve things. It doesn't mean that we will make everything perfect. No government is perfect.
No, absolutely. One of the questions I got in here, the last book you read, which was really impactful, and you're still thinking about that. Or maybe you can say recently you finished a book.
Yeah, look, there's many books I've read that have been impactful. In the last couple of years, a terrific book that I read by Ross Garno called Superpower talked about Australia's clean energy potential.
I love that.
Every developed country in the world, Australia has the best renewable energy resources, solar, wind, of any country. And so in the shift towards a non-carbonised world a decarbonised world that we're seeing now, Australia has the chance to claim that economic advantage of cheap power. So more solar, more wind. So that was a really complex, technically difficult book, but I'm glad I persevered with it because it gave me a better understanding of this issue. I also read a book over summer on mindfulness. And
I love that book.
Yeah, it was really good. I should do the exercises a little bit more, but it certainly made me think about just how powerful our attention is and how often it is hijacked for other purposes. So I think we'd all benefit from that.
Absolutely. As you said about the solar and clean energy, I remember like when Elon Musk, I'm a big Elon Musk fan. When he came to Australia, he was shocked when the reporter said like we get most of our power energy from coals, and like he was shocked. He was like, I thought Australia is a big land of country. Like you guys have like just a few kilometers of like solar and you can get all Australians that clean energy. He was shocked, and I was really shocked as well when the PM brought that call and said this is the future. And I was embarrassed. I was like, this is so bad.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, back in the day it made sense. Some decades ago, before there was an awareness of carbon emissions and climate change and the harm that humans were doing to the planet by burning fossil fuels, Australia had some of the best coal reserves in the world, so it made sense. It gave us huge advantage from the 1960s and 70s of cheap power. But that's the point I'm making. We don't have to, in the transition, lose that historical advantage. We reclaim it with even cheaper power, because solar and wind is by far the cheapest form of new power.
It is.
But we've lost a decade under this government. We should be much further ahead in that transition. We should have cheaper power than we do now. So Labor's got a terrific plan to actually accelerate that transition.
Yeah, absolutely.
And cut power bills.
If you would be 18 now, what skills you would be working on a lot? This is for young people, this question.
Young people. If I was 18 now, probably two things. I wish in some ways that I'd taken a gap year. I went straight from school to university. I did say to my daughter when she came to me, when she was finishing high school, she said, I want to do a gap year. And I said, that sounds fine, darling. I said, 3 conditions. And she said, I thought you'd say no.
Okay.
And I said, no, you haven't heard my conditions. I said, have a gap year, but you have to then go to university or TAFE, do something. I don't mind what you do. TAFE's fine, university's fine. Do something you're interested in, but you have to do something or I'll kill you. If you, not really kill her, turn a phrase. If you want to travel, get a job and no grandkids.
Okay.
So, they were the 3 rules.
Okay.
And I wish in some ways that I'd taken that year because I've always been someone who's worked hard. But one of my only life regrets, apart from not living and working overseas, is never having learnt a foreign language to fluency.
Oh my God.
I wish that I'd actually stuck with a second language, and it's a weakness that most Australians who are born here are so lazy with learning second languages.
I'm not here to, to make myself like I'm so good, like that. But the worst thing about being a refugee is like you have to learn a lot of languages. I learned Pakistani, which is Urdu, and which can be spoken in India as well. And I speak my own mother tongue, which is Farsi, Dari, Hazaragi. I don't know, you name it. And English, a little bit English,
Well, you're completely fluent.
When I was in Indonesia for 6 months, I loved their language. I was learning their language as well. Bahasa Indonesia. Yeah.
So yes, so that's what I wish when I was 18. I might have taken a little bit more time to see a bit more of the world. That I learned a lot of language.
Yeah, traveling, love that. Love that part. Yeah. If you would
I
not
vaguely remember traveling.
in the past 3 years we have been in Quran. If you would not be right now, if you are not an MP, what else you would be? You would love to be.
Well, before I was a member of Parliament, I worked for some years as a senior public servant in Victoria. I love the public service. I think we should always aspire to have very bright people who work hard in our public service. You can judge a good society in so many ways based on the quality of its public services, the support that it gives to its citizens at key points in their life, and to do that you need great public servants. So I love that. I may well be back working in the public service in a different part of the country. I wanted to, when I chose to stand for Parliament, my daughter had just finished year 12, so I was thinking about working somewhere apart from Victoria, so that's one thing. I've had lots of offers also to work in consulting firms or in business. I just never really decided to do that because I've always been attracted to community or public service. So that, and I was falling in love with international education as a sector. So I'd thought about maybe going to work for a university or actually work in the sector at some point.
I work in university. I loved it. Yeah, I love it. I'm loving it. Honestly, everyone is so professional. Maybe it's I like university become part of my identity. Since I was in uni, my second year, I was just started with the basic role. Now I work in one of the legal teams, which is amazing. Yeah, I love it. Definitely educational system. If you work there, you're gonna enjoy a lot. You have been doing a lot of nice stuff for this community, and I can say you have been helping. You have been listening to everyone. What is the nicest thing someone else done for you?
The nicest thing someone's done for me. Some of the very personal thank yous that you get really stay with you and touch you. It's I see it as part of the job. And I'll do my best to help people. I don't care whether they vote Labor or Liberal. I just don't think that's relevant. I'll do my best to help people who live in the electorate. Unfortunately, you can't help everyone, and I get hundreds or thousands of emails from people across the country about their migration case, and you just can't do that, unfortunately. I wish I could. But some of the personal thank yous that people have said when you've saved their relative or got someone here for the birth of a child, they stay with you and they're very touching.
Absolutely. One of my final question, I got 2 questions, but I'm going to ask one of them. Anything you love people ask you?
The funniest questions tend to come from primary school students.
Okay.
Probably the hardest questions come from either primary school students or senior citizens who are quite old.
Yeah.
Because it's like they have no filter. Because if you got to the point where you're 80,
Yeah, you got nothing to
the
lose.
right to go, I don't care, this is what I think, I'm just going to ask you the question. And if you're sort of 9 or 10,
You're too
then you
naive.
might not have worked out that's not a really polite question. So you do get some pretty funny questions.
Yeah, okay, interesting.
I won't repeat them and give you any ideas, but there's some pretty funny questions you get at schools.
Yeah. Oh, but I forgot to add a little bit before that question. I thought like you're gonna work. I said like if you would not be MP, you would be something else. I thought like you're gonna say like I would be an influencer because you got that kind of like attractiveness.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know. I just like doing things with or for people.
Okay. So that was it, my question. How people get in touch with you for the people who don't know how to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so lots of different ways. Look, for people who live in the electorate, the priority focus for individuals has to be in our democratic system, the people who live in the electorate.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's impossible to respond to everyone in Australia. You just can't do it. There's 25 million people want me. Doesn't add up. Can't do that. So people in the electorate will tend to call the office or visit or email. Generally, we can't do meetings on individual migration cases because, again, I get nothing done all day.
Yeah, that's right.
But we do ask people if they live in the electorate and they've got an issue that we can help with to email.
Yeah.
But the other point that I'd make, and it's an important point, because everyone comes to Australia if they're adults with an idea of how government or politics works from their home country. Politicians in Australia don't make the decisions on these things. You know, if it's a migration application or a Centrelink application, they're made by the public service independently. We make the laws and we'll set the policies.
Yeah.
We can raise questions when the administration's not going well, but we can't make a decision.
Okay.
And we can't put someone to the top of the queue. If the waiting time is going to be a year and they've only been 2 months, then we have to explain to people, look, unfortunately, I can't fix that.
Yeah, there's people in front of you.
You know, it doesn't matter how much you get angry at me or how nice you are to me or how much you say you're going to vote for me or whether you offer me money. I won't take the money. That's corruption.
Did anybody offer you money?
A couple of people sort of said, we can buy you lunch. I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that. It's Australia. No, it's a good thing.
Oh, they just wanted to say thank you.
Yeah, well, no, sure. That's very nice.
No, that's a cultural conflict in our culture.
That's saying thank you.
Yeah.
That's a different thing.
Yeah. We say thank you like to buy someone a lunch.
Exactly, and I do
Sitting-
appreciate that when my diary allows it. Lisa, who does my diary, gets very angry when I say yes to things like that. But it's nice sometimes.
Okay.
But yeah, so look, people generally approach in those ways. You do get a lot of messages on social media. I try to keep an eye on them and respond where I can, but it's actually impossible to respond to every message. I don't really check Instagram messages, so don't bother because I just thought there's too many.
Email is the best.
Email is the best. If you live in the electorate, email is the best.
Yeah, just like not spamming email, something more serious.
Like
yeah. Well, that was it. My question. Anything I forgot to ask you? You want to share with people, or you want to pass a message to people in this election? I'm sure like you have explained a lot of stuff, and my question was not in order. Just last minute, if you want to share anything,
Sure.
I forgot to ask you.
I'll say two things. Firstly, yes, I'm a Labor MP. Was fundamentally because of my family story. My mum grew up poor in Footscray in Melbourne. She was a very, very bright woman, but she came from a family who couldn't afford the uniforms for her to finish year 12. So she could never achieve her life's dream of being a doctor because her family simply couldn't even afford the uniforms for her to go to the right school back then. I thought that was fundamentally unfair. And so that forged my notion that anyone in society, whether they're born rich or poor, should have the chance to fulfil their potential in life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the philosophy of the Labor Party, is equality of opportunity, giving everyone a fair chance at life and making sure that we have good services. It was Labor governments that created Medicare, that created universal social security, created the age pension and disability pension, created universal superannuation, opened up universities. It was all Labor governments that do these big things, created the disability scheme, reformed Australia's economy to create the wealth that we've enjoyed for 30 years. They were Labor governments who do big things. So I hope to see a change of government, but that's up to people to make up their own mind. The thing I'd say above all else is democracy is not a spectator sport.
Yeah.
people should, at the very least, take an interest and have an informed view. Don't just go to the polling booth and, tick a box. Don't
randomly
tick a box. You've got to number all the boxes. That's an important point.
Yeah.
If you want to vote Labor, copy all the numbers.
Hopefully we make another video for the people.
Yeah, we can make another one on that. But above all else, treasure the fact that you can vote, because as people from Afghanistan know as well or better than anyone, there are millions of people right now fighting for the right to choose their government through voting. We should value the fact that we can. And if people want to get involved in the political process, volunteer on election day, we welcome that.
Absolutely, yeah. So thank you. That's a very good remark. Yes, you have the power to shape the future of Australia. You can choose to vote any party. You can choose to vote any party. So be mindful of your vote, who you're voting. Yeah.
Thanks, Mehdi. Thank you for taking the time to have a chat. He's a bit famous on YouTube, I hear.
No, I'm just trying to help everyone, raise more awareness, something like that. Yeah, such an honor to sit down with you, and thanks for making me tea. Honestly, you're more friendly than on TV, and talk to you, especially talk to you. I felt it more comfortable. I wish more people like yourself raise awareness in Parliament about any issue, and I wish you best of luck in this coming election. And I'm so happy to have the chance to speak to you today.
Thank you.
What an honor. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for watching.
Yeah, thanks for watching.